You're listening to 88.7 WLUW Chicago Sound Alliance, broadcasting from the campus of Loyola University. Next up is Live from the Heartland, featuring Michael James, Katy, Hogan, and Thom Clark. Today's show features conversations with John Arena and Jessica Simmons Jimenez. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Oh, some of my co-hosts were afraid that they might fall back to sleep on this Saturday morning. We just wanted to soothe you a little bit as we go through this transition from winter to spring, which will happen, folks. It will happen. A little sentimental mood, Duke Ellington's famous piece as played by Billy Taylor. This is in part deference to our wonderful engineer, Jake, who has his own jazz show here on WLUW.
Okay, the alarm's going off. Wake up, everybody. Here we go.
We welcome to the High Life from the Heartland microphones a very excellent local politician, former alderman of the 45th Ward. I
Still
really
the
hate
alderman.
to say that. John Arena will be alderman for another 2 months. And John, thank you for joining us this morning.
It's a
we
pleasure
have
being
so
here.
much to talk about, but I think we want to start off by talking about how after 8 years you were through a rough one in your ward.
Yeah.
It's been a couple of weeks. You want to talk at all about what that whole experience is like?
I woke up on Wednesday morning and to what's a wholly different ward in terms of its politics. And it's driven by some, very disturbing elements. And, it's an outcrop of the national politics of protectionism and exclusion and
racism.
I'll
say it.
Yeah. And I think, there's some that's where it's driven from. But I think the bigger problem is that's not the majority of folks in the community. I think the majority of folks in the community, hear a constant drumbeat of you're losing from three candidates running against me, coordinated. And that becomes the narrative that they're concerned about. And these are homeowners that either have been there a long time or new homeowners that don't know what was 8 years ago or what was 20 years ago when I first moved into the area.
Right.
And so, this becomes a, watch your property values conversation, watch who's going to be next door, conversations about density and low income housing or affordable housing versus, I should say, affordable housing, because those are two different things. So, this was the coordinated campaign, and it was effective not just in the north, but also in the south, which was the more progressive end of the ward, where we saw my numbers slip a little bit. We didn't see the kind of turnout from those precincts that we needed to see to combat, the base on the north that has, for the last 8 years, been told, I'm coming to take your property from you.
John, fill us in a little bit on the ward, the 45th Ward. Who lives there? Firemen, police officers, city workers, new residents, racial makeup, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
and Democrats, Republicans.
Yeah, it's northwest side. So this kind of the center, the beating heart of it is the Jefferson Park Transit Center. It's got Old Irving, Independence Park, portions of Portage Park, Jefferson Park, Gladstone Park, and then Union Ridge, Big Oaks, on the far northwest.
God, that's a lot
And
of
it
neighborhoods.
stretches, so it's very different north to south. Geography is different. The makeup of the area is different in terms of transit. We have Six Corner Shopping District, which is now emerging, and Jefferson Park, which had been dormant for decades with just empty parcels of land around a busy transit center. And activating that was always going to be a difficult conversation with a community that, was basically living with this blight, but living with this kind of narrative that, well, we can't let a developer, win anything. And so then you can't build if you can't say there's an allowance for some capitalist motivation. And that's where you try to work the middle and say, look, we need to build something, and let's have a conversation about that. And we did that. I think we did it successfully. The best news here is that the 8 years I've spent in office has produced authorization for good, wholesome, contextual development around the transit center to recreate the downtown Jefferson Park and activate it and give people an opportunity to live in a fully ADA accessible transit center that has 13 bus lines and 2 train lines that run through it. And not activating that is an irresponsible act. If I had just said, like my predecessor, Pat LeVar did, look, I'm afraid for my political life and not for the life of my community, then there's no way I could have done this job. That was not why I ran in the first place. So I'm proud of that we have authorized, we have 5 major developments around Jeff Park that are going to be in the ground. One of them is already in the ground. 5150, which is a mixed income building with 75 units and 60 of them being scaled affordable. Those things are going to move forward. So that's the work that you have to do before you put a shovel in the ground. And the same thing on the south in Six Corners in Portage Park, which has to become a destination shopping district again. The foundations are laid. So we're going to see construction on 3 of those 6 corners starting this summer, and that's going to be transformative. That's going to be the things that we need to see happen.
John Arena, in trying to activate these shopping districts, what have you learned about aldermanic prerogative?
It's obviously it's like any tool. It can be used for negative and can be used for positive. I mean, I used aldermanic prerogative to a certain extent to move 5150 forward in the face of very harsh rhetoric, but by using the prerogative to allow space and time for people who are supportive to organize, we saw that voice come out, and we have organizations like Chicago Housing Initiative, which got involved in our part of the city and had never had a reason to. But more importantly, locally, Neighbors for Affordable Housing is now established and now is going to be a force in the absolute conversation that will happen under this next administration about affordable housing across this city and equity.
Sorry,
No,
I stepped on that. So do you have a Network 45 developing?
I mean, we still have the 45th Ward Independent Dems, which is the committee that it's meeting tomorrow to kind of see what do we just live through in terms of a battle, but what's the war look like going forward. And then you have organizations like Neighbors for Affordable, which is highly organized, highly intelligent group of people that know what they need to do, and are, I was at their meeting Thursday night, and they're organizing. They're already saying, yes, we see what happened here, but we have wins that come from these last 8 years. We have hundreds of units of affordable units that are either built or going to be built out of this work in the last 8 years. I mean, we're looking at something north of 240 units, affordable units that are going to be going to be in 45 total within the next 2 years.
Let's make sure
and
they're
there was
registered.
Next to zero when I came into office.
Give them a little background history when they move in.
What was the exact turnout for you?
I think we were around 14, a little over about 14,500, which was a little shy of what we were targeting. We were thinking about 15.
Percent-wise, what does that mean?
Percent-wise was 45%. Yeah.
So you had higher turnout like we did in 49 than the city as a whole.
Which is not uncommon, I think, for either
Right.
49 or 45. The
Right.
Northwest wards come out and vote. What happened was there was a motivated base of Republicans. There was new registers that are now active because of the conversation about affordability and density, and we just didn't see the turnout from the progressives, the Democrats that we had hoped for on the south end of the ward.
So just staying with the race in 45 before we go citywide and bigger, global. What does it take? I mean, you had 3 people running against you. It's clear that there were lies told, and there were personal attacks, and caustic messaging by them, which is now kind of, as you put, what's that word you used? The coarsening of the public, of the political dialogue. What do we do to offset that? Obviously, in your case, we need to get more progressives out to vote.
Yeah.
So Maria Haddon's team needs to come to 45 and rustle up those votes, but because they found them. But what do we do to offset the real rancor that we have to deal with in the political?
Well,
realm?
I think as as progressives, we have to be willing to get into these conversations in a productive way online. And the thing that I think we saw is that there was multiple pages set up over the last 8 years, and they really more even sprung up in this campaign during the campaign that were anti-arena, anti-this, anti-that. And, it's a bit of this, Dan Proft, style
Right.
of create a seemingly legitimate news source. And then, where we aren't good is getting into the fight in a positive way and with real information. We have to figure out how to be present in there without devolving into the name calling and to the bigotry and racism.
Right.
So, but we have to be there because the problem is we're in a reality TV show,
Yeah.
world of politics where people like the show. And so they go and see, well, what did this guy say on the right and what did this guy say on the left and where's the fight going on? And unfortunately, that's affecting their perception of reality. So it's really about the folks the middle that are watching this
Yeah.
and being influenced one way or the other. And if there's no counter to the absolute falsehoods that get spun by the alt-right, this is who is active now on the Northwest Side and across the city, then you're going to lose the perception battle. Despite what's going on the street, they're going to say there's an empty storefront, and the reason why is this. Or if you bring those people here, then you're going to have more empty storefronts, and not talk about hundreds of businesses actually opening there you could actually go.
Right.
Where my opposition was going and having fundraisers at places where literally there was empty storefronts. So it's a narrative of reality that we have to make sure we're pushing.
So having said all that, how are you going to use social media from day one after this past election to give a positive message, to gather and educate more residents and neighbors in the ward?
Well, we're going to look for those forums where there's reasonable people that don't want to get into that kind of reality TV show, caustic.
Baloney.
So, make sure we start there, and we're talking to that base, which is we just want to know what's going on. We want to be part of a conversation. We want to have access to involvement in the community and the discussion, but we don't want to play these games. And so I think we start there and then build out a network from there and making sure that we have a counter to the narrative that unfortunately won the day in this round, but again, only one battle in the larger war that we're fighting going forward.
So while you lost your reelection effort, you're still ward committeeman, and your independent organization is trying to figure out what your next step would be. But so I don't want to rob from that process in your meeting tomorrow. But you're inclined to stay in the process. You're not going off into retirement.
No, I'm not. I'm not going
figuring
anywhere.
out some nice teaching job someplace.
No, this wasn't. I mean, my 8 years in office was an honor and had a mission that began 25 years ago when I first settled here with my wife and started a family. So this is my community, and it's like a family. You take everybody, whether you agree with them at Thanksgiving dinner or not, and you find ways to work together to improve that. So this is just one step in that larger lifespan that I'll be spending here.
What are some of the significant aldermanic runoffs that you want to comment on?
Well, I'm really interested in seeing Robert Murphy and 39 get in. When I first got elected in 2011, parts of what is now the 39th Ward were part of 45.
Right.
Robert Murphy was a constituent and a big part of helping me get the win. And so I know him. I know where his politics are. I've seen what he's done as committeeman, running against Marge Lorino and coming very close in 2015 to winning. But as committeeman, he's done a great job of organizing. He showed his values. And what we need to do is make sure that ward stays a progressive ward, that he becomes a part of the progressive caucus on the council, and brings that value system to play. He'll be a strong leader for the ward to help move it forward. He has a bit of some of the same challenges I had, where there's a bit of a split east and west and north and south. But it's definitely a winnable race for him. And if folks are inclined on getting in a race that's really going to matter in terms of the balance on city council of kind of keeping the status quo, with his opposition versus bringing in somebody who's going to be a productive part of the Progressive Caucus. That's a race to get involved in and knock on a few doors or donate.
What other races are on your
Radar.
radar?
Well, we were talking a little bit. Leslie Harrison is a colleague of mine and on the caucus, and she's had obviously with the focus of the Obama Center, that's been a contentious fight that she's had to navigate. I know something about contentious fights and the extent that aldermanic prerogative and the influence you have at alderman is perceived as being all encompassing. But on something like the Obama Center, it's not. And so to put it all on what the alderman could or couldn't do, I believe talking to her, there's a lot of provisions that are built into the opportunity that the Obama Center brings that help get you to some of the things that what the opposition is looking for in a consent decree can get you. The challenge is anytime you create opportunities like that, you create gentrification. And I don't think that personally, I don't think that a community benefits agreement is going to be the thing that changes the dynamic of gentrification when you bring, even if it's a Starbucks to a neighborhood or new businesses in general, or something as transformative as the Obama Center. So what we need is things like a better ARO, right? Affordable Renters Ordinance, a better structure for making sure that affordability is built into development at its literally DNA level, which is not the case now. And so I just don't think it's fair to say the alderman should have done this when this is a fight that's way above the pay grade of an alderman. This is about the structure of how we develop in our city. And, we're seeing this with Lincoln Yards where, we're going to put 600 units, into a 6,000, unit development and then subsidize it with $1.2 billion. That's counterintuitive, right? If it's affordable, it's got to be affordable that comes with the value given to the developer by the zoning increase.
John, in just immediately south of the 49th Ward, we have a very interesting race between the current mayor's floor captain and now finance chair Patrick O'Connor and Andre Vasquez. How do you think that one's going to pan out?
That one's, I
Is
met with
O'Connor in trouble?
I think, getting 33%, obviously I think that was always going to be a tough race for him to come out on top with four candidates that were, again, it was a choice between which progressive do you want. And there was maybe degrees there, but, now we know which one won the day. I think that there's going to be a lot of coalescing of those opposition votes to Vasquez, and Pat O'Connor's going to have a hard time kind of winning back folks to say just because I've delivered good, constituent services and gotten the potholes filled at a moment when people are looking at a transformation in the city council. So I think that's going to be a tough race for Pat O'Connor.
John, I know we have some races, runoffs going to happen, but what do you predict the future of the Progressive Caucus to be in this next administration, no matter who becomes elected mayor?
Look, I think it is positioned to be a really major force in pushing the city council to have a chance to be independent from the mayor, to having their own agenda and really moving legislation. I think the numbers grow from the 11 we are now, at least by 5, if not more, depending on how some of these races shake out. So that is exciting for me because that was what we've seen over the last 2 terms of really pushing a narrative that we can do things in a better way. We can be more informed. We can be more proactive as a council. And we were never going to see that happen under this mayor, as we were just talking about him pushing through things at the 11th hour here that are things that are generally caustic to the progressive agenda.
Well, a little follow-up on that. If Lincoln Yards gets passed in this current administration, is it a done deal, or is there any future maneuvers that can be made to reverse that?
Well, the thing about Lincoln Yards is it is basically a framework. So there are things built into it where as new phases of it move forward, they're going to have to come back to Planning Commission. They're going to come back to the City Council. So it is not a hard-baked, here's the exact number of buildings, here's the design of the building. It is a framework only. So there is opportunity for the next mayor and the next city council to inform that and us not see the exact plan. And it's not even an exact plan. It's evolved literally day by day over the last couple of days as I've been in briefings about it and hearings about it. Every day there's a new change to it. So that shows you that this isn't as hard-baked as it might perceive to be, and that there is a huge amount of opportunity for the communities, for aldermen, for this next mayor to inform that in terms of scale and how it's implemented.
Were you surprised at the dynamic at that hearing that Alderman Kappelman tried to defer, and Alderman Burnett said, "Oh no, you can't tell me what to do in my ward"?
Walter
That's $1.3 billion of Chicago taxpayers' money that they want to subsidize their condos.
Yeah, when it's convenient, it's perceived as, well, this is an aldermanic prerogative thing, as if, this is about Hopkins representing his community. Right now, there's nobody in that little polyp that comes off of the second ward that was designed.
There's a saw pile and
There's a
some
saw-
scrap yards, and
Yeah.
there used to be jobs.
And I think there's literally one constituent that might actually live somewhere in there, but
The
it
owner
was
of the
designed to be to border. But the thing is, this borders 3 different wards and hundreds of thousands of residents. As you mentioned, it's encapsulating billions of dollars in revenue that is going to be directed towards infrastructure. And basically the structure that they've put together is to say, well, they're going to pay for the infrastructure, but we're going to pay them back over 23 years from the increment. Well, we want to see, we don't know what the redevelopment agreement looks like, so we don't know what the interest rates caps are going to be on that. We've had some verbal assurances, but I'm definitely a show me on paper, otherwise it doesn't exist. So there's an awful lot that we don't know about, and they want to pass the zoning Wednesday, and then in April they're going to come back with the finance part of this, which is the TIF. And that's troubling.
It's interesting when we have these conversations, particularly about TIF dollars, the public never gets a report card back 10 years, 20 years down the line to see how well did this TIF perform for the neighborhood. It would be interesting for us to know that so that we could actually have weight behind our... I think it's perfectly fine for us to say, no, you don't get to use TIF money for a rich people development, a Mayor 1% type development. But on all the TIFs, we have TIFs all over this city, including in our own ward. How have they performed, and who's keeping track? It's just a question to float out there.
Well, this one will perform incredibly well since they valued a portion of the land, which is the North and Troop Fleet and Facilities, land that was sold for $106 million. From an EVA standpoint, from the tax-based standpoint, was valued at zero because it was owned by the city and so had no tax value. That doesn't mean it doesn't have market value. So from day one, you set your increment at zero, and then anything above the increment of that zero becomes increment that's captured, which means you go from 0 to 1.6 million in the first assessment, and then whatever as you build on it.
And the public goes back to zero. This is what gets me about this. It's corporate welfare. It is parking meter 2.0.
And it's a de facto tax increase because the schools will get the money that they're going to get in the levy. If you want more money for schools, then agree to a higher tax levy for your schools. The TIF just says, look, it's a bucket, that is now got a hole in it, and it's the TIF is the money draining out. Exactly. Now you have to open the spigot further. The folks that are not in a TIF have to pay more to offset that
leak.
Billions of dollars. Exactly. So this is the way TIFs work. To do this, they don't literally take money out of a school. It just means you're paying more if you're not in that TIF, and you then are sequestering this money for some kind of development. And that development could be positive or negative, but in this case, we could have done this differently and said, no, we're going to give you value by increasing your zoning from basically manufacturing to DX, which is downtown zoning. So by the difference between that zoning is an immense amount of real estate value.
John, you should be teaching classes on this. Are you going to do that?
I believe I'll have some free time.
Yes.
And I'll be looking for some ways to get what I've learned at City Council and the research I've done, and
Seriously.
working with guys like Scott Wagasback and others to really bring this kind of light to this kind of issue. I would love to be working in that.
Do you
Yeah.
expect much more fallout from the Solis wire? Are there other people going to be implicated in? And where does Burke stand right now in the council?
Well, I mean, he was reelected with 55% of the vote, which is troubling. I mean, that sends a very chilling message. Now, that's an election. It has nothing to do with the fact that he has a federal indictment pending, that he is going to have to fight that. I honestly think if he tries to come back as finance chair next term, that is going to be an epic battle that I will be in the council chambers to help cheer on, because that is not where we want to return. That would send a horrible signal.
I wonder what
there
the
are
turnout
others-
was in his ward.
Yeah, I mean,
whether
it's
it
not
was-
incredibly high there. It's unfortunate that
Citywide, it's not incredibly high. It's terrible to have such a low bar, but if he went less than 40%, that says something about his ward, saying, I don't know.
Well, the
I don't
Latino
care."
turnout was low everywhere,
Yeah.
less than expected.
Yes, low
And
everywhere.
so he got the benefit of that in his ward,
Right.
And he probably got the white constituency, most of them.
yeah.
And
And the benefit of this, interestingly enough, and I think it was a factor in my race too, that the confusion and kind of locking up of the voters' decision process, having too many choices.
Yeah.
And it's not that all 14 candidates were viable or even good, candidates. It's that you had 6 or 7 halfway decent candidates that had some base, and people were having a really hard time when I was at the door, literally up until the weekend before. That's when I saw a shift to people saying, I'm with Lori, or I'm with Tony or Daley, or Jerry Joyce, which were the kind of 4 top vote getters around the 45th and the Northwest side.
Speaking of Tony and Lori, what do you think the effect of Willie Wilson's endorsement of Lori will have?
I
Given
think
that some of the women, people worry that because she's gay, that a lot of his constituency may not support her.
Well, I think, it's hard to say how much an endorsement from a candidate that, again, no candidate got over 15%. I mean, or Lori might have got 16, 17%. But, you're talking about some percentage that's going to come that way. So I think it generally helps. You're not going to get everybody who voted for Willie Wilson to come out and vote for Lori just because Willie said that.
Right.
Or any other candidate that might endorse.
Right.
So I think it helps her because she needs to make sure that the black vote stays with her and rises. She gets the progressive votes out of that. But it's a mixed bag. I mean, she got the local 2 vote endorsement, and that came along with Sposato and Napolitano, which are caustic to her politics.
Right.
And she was open about that.
She made that clear when she was in the last debate I saw.
Exactly.
So it's been terrific to have you for all this time. And the question we didn't get to that I'm curious about is what electoral reforms should we be organizing around, specifically to answer that question of when we've got 14 candidates, is it time for us to do ranked choice voting in Chicago? Do you have any thoughts about electoral reforms?
Yeah, I mean,
before we-
I love the idea of ranked choice voting. I think that's something that we've seen success in other places and helps people get to the polls because they don't feel like it's a choice. Well, if I don't vote for this candidate, does that mean this
That's
one's
right.
going to outmaneuver? It gives you more of a play into that first vote and brings more people to the table. I think we need to really consider publicly financed campaigns. We talk all the time about money in politics,
Right.
Whether it's coming from developers, whether it's coming from unions, and how do those 2 things suppress the small donors in the middle that feel like,
Right.
well, if I make a $25 contribution, what does it actually do?
Bingo.
And the reality is we know it does an awful lot. Look what Bernie came out, and announced, and $6 million in the first day. The average donation was $27. So we have to do additive politics in that regard. But if we can formalize that like other states have done and other cities have done, then I think we can have a more robust dialogue and candidates can be involved in a way that they haven't before.
John Arena.
Thank
What-
you so much.
What
You're
a
welcome.
treat to have you. And what an honor to have you in council for 8 years. Hope to see you back in that room in other capacities soon. And
Absolutely.
And thank you for all your gifts to your own community. I know that they are appreciated. I saw it online, and saw all the kudos to you. So we
Yeah.
haven't heard the last of this guy.
No, I don't
For
think
sure.
so.
No, and I want to thank everybody, the love and support that's come out and the appreciation for the work that I've done in partnership with some of my colleagues in the Progressive Caucus is incredibly meaningful to me and my family because they put everything into this as well.
They did,
And
yes.
all I can say is you lose a war, but you lose a battle, but you don't lose the war, and you learn a lot from that battle. And we're in the fight, and it's just a matter of coming back. So stay strong.
Amen, brother.
Best to you, John.
You're listening to Live from the Heartland on WLUW 88.7 FM and WLUW.org. Please like us on Facebook